Power is rarely loud. It does not beg. It does not explain itself. Power waits and lets the world come looking for it. Today, we are discussing the power of scarcity, not as a motivational slogan, but as a strategic weapon. A weapon Niccolò Machiavelli understood centuries before job titles, resumes, or LinkedIn profiles existed. Because here is the uncomfortable truth most people never confront. The world does not reward effort. It rewards leverage. And leverage is born from scarcity. Why scarcity creates power in The Prince, Machiavelli repeatedly returns to one central theme. Control over access determines control over outcomes. A prince who is easily reached is easily manipulated. A resource that is abundant is easily ignored. A man whose skills are replaceable is easily underpaid. Scarcity is not arrogance. Scarcity is positioning. Robert Cialdini, in Influence, calls scarcity one of the 6 universal laws of persuasion. Humans instinctively value what appears rare, limited, or difficult to obtain. When something feels accessible, we delay. When it feels scarce, we act. Machiavelli understood this psychologically long before behavioral science put a name to it. He wrote not about being liked, but about being needed. And in modern terms, being needed means this. When you leave the room, the system should feel unstable. The trap of overavailability. Most people sabotage their own financial value in one fatal way. They overexpose their usefulness. They answer every call. They solve every problem. They volunteer every skill. And then they wonder why their value never increases. Machiavelli warned against this exact behavior, for in his analysis of court politics, he observed that those who made themselves constantly available lost influence because their presence stopped being special. In The Art of War, Sun Tzu reinforces this principle. Appear weak when you are strong, and strong when you are weak. Modern translation? Never reveal your full capacity up front. When your employer, client, or market knows everything you can do, they stop negotiating and start assuming. Scarcity requires discipline. Value is not what you can do. It is what only you can do. Here is where most people misunderstand unique skills. They think uniqueness means being rare at something no one needs. That is useless. Scarcity is not obscurity. Scarcity is rare value at a critical pressure point. See, Machiavelli advised princes to master skills that were indispensable during moments of crisis. Diplomacy during unrest, military command during invasion, decisiveness during uncertainty. Ask yourself, what problems do people panic about? What moments create urgency? Where does hesitation cost money, reputation, or power? Your financial leverage lives there. Stephen Covey, in The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, describes this as operating in Quadrant 2, important, not urgent work. But Machiavelli would add a sharper edge. Control what becomes urgent for others. If your skill only matters when things are calm, it is optional. If your skill matters when things are on fire, it is priceless. The Psychology of Replaceability. Chris Voss, former FBI hostage negotiator and author of Never Split the Difference, teaches a brutal truth. The side that needs the deal less has the power. This applies perfectly to careers and income. When you desperately need validation, approval, or stability, you negotiate against yourself. Machiavelli would call this self-inflicted weakness. Replaceable people seek security. Scarce people create dependency. The goal is not to threaten departure. The goal is to make your absence expensive. That is the difference between begging for raises and being offered them. Consider this true pattern, repeated across industries. 2 professionals. Same education. Same environment. One constantly announces their achievements, reminds leadership of their contributions, and demands recognition. The other says little, documents everything, solves problems quietly, but only when it matters most. When restructuring comes, it's who survives, not the loud one. Machiavelli warned against advertising virtue too aggressively. He believed perception mattered more than proclamation. Men judge more by the eye than by the hand. If your value must be explained, it is already weakening. Scarcity is created, not inherited. Let's dismantle a comforting lie. Some people are just naturally valuable. No, value is engineered. Scarcity is created through selective availability, strategic silence, controlled output, timing your contribution. In The Art of War, Sun Tzu speaks of withholding troops until the decisive moment. Machiavelli echoes this politically. Strike when the balance of power favors you. Modern application? Do not solve problems too early. Do not give solutions before authority is established. Do not flood the market with your best work for free. Scarcity requires restraint. And restraint feels uncomfortable to people addicted to approval. The first law of Machiavellian financial power. Here is your first law. Write it down. Never be the easiest option. Be the most effective one. The easiest option is cheap. The effective one is scarce. When people must choose between convenience and results, scarcity ensures they choose you when results matter. Now pause here for a moment. If this perspective is already challenging how you view work, money, and power, then this channel is not entertainment for you. It's training. Subscribe to Machiavellian Minds, because everything we discuss here is about building leverage, not chasing approval. And in the next part, we're going deeper into how to identify your leverage point and deliberately engineer scarcity, or even if you think you currently have none. Next, we will dismantle the myth of hard work equals reward, how to identify your pressure point skill, how to reposition yourself without confrontation, and why most people negotiate too early and lose. We'll also explore how Machiavellian alliance building applies to modern careers, and I'll ask you to comment your thoughts and experiences, because strategy sharpens when tested against reality. For now, remember this. Power is not claimed. It is granted, reluctantly, to those who make themselves scarce. Perfect. Let's sharpen the blade. Power does not announce itself. It reorganizes the room quietly and lets others feel the shift. In the first phase, we established a dangerous truth. Value is not effort-based. It is leverage-based. Now we move into territory most people avoid, because it forces an uncomfortable realization. If you are underpaid, under-recognized, or ignored, it is not because you lack talent. It is because your talent is positioned incorrectly. Machiavelli would not comfort you here. He would challenge you. Why hard work fails without strategy. Machiavelli observed that rulers who relied solely on virtue were often crushed by those who understood timing, alliances, and pressure points. Hard work without strategy is virtue without power. Stephen Covey teaches effectiveness through alignment and priorities, but Machiavelli adds the missing layer: political awareness. You may be excellent, you may be disciplined, but if your excellence does not intersect with organizational fear, urgency, or ambition, it remains invisible. Scarcity is not about doing more. It is about doing what cannot be ignored. Identifying your pressure point skill. Every system has weak points. Every organization has moments of anxiety. Machiavelli studied states under siege, courts under rebellion, and princes under threat. He knew that power shifted not during peace, but during instability. Your career is no different. Ask yourself these questions carefully. When does leadership panic? What problems cause delays, losses, or reputational risk? What decisions do people hesitate to make? Your most valuable skill lives closest to uncertainty. Robert Cialdini's scarcity principle explains that people overvalue resources that reduce risk or shorten decision-making during stress. Translation: if your skill saves time, reduces uncertainty, prevents loss, or absorbs blame, it becomes scarce instantly. The Machiavellian repositioning. Move here is where people fail. They try to add skills instead of reframing existing ones. Machiavelli rarely reinvented himself. He repositioned. He understood perception beats transformation. Instead of asking, "What new skill should I learn?" ask, "Where does my current skill intersect with fear?" Example: writing is common, but crisis communication is rare. Analysis is common, but decision-making under pressure is rare. Technical ability is common, but translating complexity to authority is rare. Scarcity is often one reframing away. Controlled availability, the art of withholding. Sun Tzu warned against exhausting troops before decisive battle. Machiavelli warned against exhausting reputation through overexposure. Yet most professionals do the opposite. They respond instantly. They volunteer solutions prematurely. They solve problems before recognition is established. This creates a fatal pattern. You become useful, but not valuable. Controlled availability is the discipline of strategic delay, not silence out of fear. Silence out of calculation. When you delay your contribution slightly, something important happens. The problem becomes clearer. Stakes rise. Attention sharpens. Then, when you act, your input feels decisive. The negotiation error that destroys leverage. Chris Voss teaches that the worst negotiators rush to agreement. Why? Because urgency reveals dependency. Machiavelli would call this revealing weakness before leverage is secured. Most people negotiate compensation the moment they feel frustration. This is a mistake. Negotiation should occur after scarcity is felt, not before. The sequence matters. Create reliance, demonstrate consequence, then negotiate. If you reverse this order, you beg in polished language. Consider this pattern. A professional quietly becomes the bridge between departments. No announcement. No title change. Just strategic positioning. Over time, projects stall without them. Decisions wait for their input. Errors increase in their absence. They never demand a raise. Instead, they let leadership discover the cost of delay. When negotiation finally occurs, it is no longer about salary. It is about containment of risk. That is Machiavellian leverage. Scarcity does not require confrontation. This is critical. Machiavelli warned against unnecessary conflict. He preferred influence over force. You do not need to threaten resignation. You do not need ultimatums. But you do not need emotional appeals. Scarcity works silently. Your absence should create discomfort, not drama. The role of strategic relationships. Machiavelli emphasized alliances over popularity. Covey speaks of emotional bank accounts. Machiavelli would say, choose where to deposit influence. Scarcity increases faster when the right people depend on you. Your skill travels through power channels. Decision-makers associate stability with your presence. Not everyone needs access to you. Only the ones who control outcomes. Pause here. I want you to reflect honestly. Have you ever realized that things became chaotic when you stepped back? Have you noticed moments where your absence created friction, delays, or confusion? Comment below. What skill do you suspect might be your pressure point skill? Or where do you think you've been overgiving without leverage? Your answers reveal more than you think, and they sharpen your awareness for what comes next. Next, we will move into the final phase, how to monetize scarcity without exposure. When to expand and when to stay rare. how to protect your value as demand increases, and why Machiavelli warned against becoming too indispensable too quickly. We'll end with how to lock in long-term financial power. For now, remember this. Scarcity is not absence. It is controlled presence at decisive moments. Scarcity, once created, attracts attention. Attention, unmanaged, attracts danger. Machiavelli warned repeatedly. Power gained without foresight collapses under its own visibility. So if Batch 1 was about understanding scarcity, and Batch 2 was about engineering leverage, then Batch 3 is about the hardest part, keeping your power once others recognize it. Because the moment you become valuable, forces move against you. Subtly, quietly, politically. And if you mishandle this phase, you don't just lose money. You lose position. The paradox of being indispensable. Most people think the goal is to be irreplaceable. Machiavelli disagreed. He warned princes against becoming so singular that resentment and fear formed alliances against them. In modern terms, if you become indispensable too openly, the system will look for a way to neutralize you. That neutralization may look like knowledge extraction, forced delegation, sudden process improvements, or replacement disguised as restructuring. Scarcity must be portable, not trapped, turning scarcity into negotiable value. Chris Voss teaches that successful negotiators never argue worth, they frame cost. This is pure Machiavelli. You never say, "I deserve more." You let reality say, "This system bleeds without you." The monetization phase follows a strict order. Step 1, scarcity is felt. Step 2, dependency becomes visible. Step 3, risk of loss is acknowledged. Step 4, compensation is justified. If you negotiate before Step 3, you expose insecurity. If you negotiate after Step 4, terms come to you. The Machiavellian pricing mindset. Most people price themselves emotionally, based on effort, based on fairness, based on comparison. Machiavelli would call this naive. Value is not moral, value is situational. Ask, what happens if I leave? What happens if this delays? Well, what happens if this fails publicly? Your compensation should reflect avoided damage, not time spent. Robert Cialdini's scarcity principle confirms this. People pay more to prevent loss than to acquire gain. Position your value accordingly. Expand or stay rare. The strategic choice. Here is where many fall. Once demand rises, the temptation is to expand endlessly. More availability, more exposure, more accessibility. This destroys scarcity. Machiavelli warned that power diluted too widely becomes uncontrollable. Instead, choose one of two paths deliberately. Path 1, controlled expansion. Train proxies, license expertise. Build systems that still point back to you. Path 2, strategic rarity. Limit access. Increase thresholds. Raise standards for engagement. Neither is right or wrong. What is fatal is drifting into expansion without control. The art of being hard to copy. Machiavelli understood that enemies imitate before they attack. In modern terms, if your value can be copied, it will be. So you must add layers. Context, judgment, timing, relationships. But these cannot be downloaded or outsourced. Your goal is not to hoard information, but to own interpretation and decision authority. That is where scarcity survives. The final Machiavellian warning. Machiavelli's most misunderstood advice was this: it is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. In modern careers, this does not mean intimidation. It means consequence awareness. People should know, quietly, that your absence costs. Your disengagement slows progress. Your withdrawal creates instability, not because you announce it, but because history has proven it. Across industries, the highest paid individuals are often the least visible. They speak. Last, commit selectively. Appear calm under pressure and never rush to justify themselves. They do not dominate conversations. They dominate outcomes. Machiavelli would recognize them immediately. If this video shifted how you see money, value, and power, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, so this message reaches those who are ready to hear it. And share it with someone who is working hard, but still feels invisible. Because scarcity begins with awareness, and awareness spreads quietly. Remember this: effort earns survival. Scarcity earns power. And power, once earned correctly, no longer asks permission. This is Machiavellian Minds.